keeping up with the Joneses and putting on that appearance that everything's great when inside the house it's really not that great. You're fighting with your husband, your child's really sick, you don't feel good about yourself, and I think, and masking it with the drug, I think that's probably the shallow part of it. Your neighbor puts on this appearance that they're perfect and you want to be perfect too. And that's how I was raised, right? If you look good on the outside and your house is perfect, you go to church on Sunday, but on Monday you're drinking or you're smoking or whatever else. But if the neighbors think you're good, then you're okay. At the academy, it's about brutal honesty, and that's what I needed. I needed somebody to tell me, you're a liar, you're manipulating me, you're sneaky, you're being mean to this person. And it hurts in the moment, right? But after you get told that so many times, you're like, I do not want to be this person anymore. I want to be good inside.
Many, many families have been traumatized or destroyed or uprooted due to the opioid crisis, opioid epidemic. I recently read a book about it called Dreamland by Samuel Quinones, and the problem was so extensive and widespread and all across the nation that it's almost like we can now point our finger at big pharma and the drugs the doctors were pushing on people. So I wanted to talk about this as well as the Other Side Academy's new project called The Other Side Village. And joining me today is Marci Slaugh. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yep.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So you have a really amazing story because you basically told me off camera that you got to a point in your life where you really just wanted to die. And that's terrible, but I think a lot of people have faced that who've undergone severe addiction. How did you find yourself getting addicted to drugs?
So it started with my second pregnancy. I got postpartum depression, and my husband said, you're not happy. And realistic, I can't even talk, sorry. Realistically, I should be happy. I have a beautiful home. I have a beautiful family. I have 2 beautiful, healthy children. And he said, if you don't go get some help, I'm going to take you. I went to the doctor. They just prescribed me antidepressants, which in turn, after a while of taking them, got me really anxious. So with that, he gave me another prescription, something to bring me down, which was a benzo, Xanax, right? Started using those, started feeling really good, and started abusing those. So that's how it started. And then I found that those weren't working anymore, and I'd start, maybe there's a Vicodin in the cupboard from my husband's dental surgery. I took that. That felt good. And it just spiraled out from there. It turned into, Oxy, doctor shopping, buying them for friends, which then in turn turned into a heroin addiction.
And the thing that I think is hard for most people to understand is like, what was the place you were at where you said it was postpartum depression, but were you believing that your doctor was just giving you the best advice, like this is just going to help calm me down for a while, I'm going to get off this, there's no problem? Was there a point where you believed that and all of a sudden you just realized, oh my gosh, I'm an addict? Or did you never come to that realization?
Of course, I listened to my doctor and I believed him in the moment, right? And it was working. But I had to continue to take more and more and more and more, and then substitute it with something else that's going to make me feel better. Because after a while of taking a drug, you build up what's the word?
Tolerance.
A tolerance for it. And that wasn't working. And so then you go and you want to find something else, which in turn leads you to something else. And you're always searching for that feel good.
Mm-hmm. And it was like, did your life sort of spiral out of control before you realized you were an addict, or was that afterward?
Well, my daughter ended up being really sick for a long time. And so, after taking care of her and putting all my attention on her, the relationship between me and my husband kind of dwindled. I, was getting some Percocets from the neighbor next door. There was an attractive man there. I got attention from him. I had an affair and I lost my marriage. So with that shame and that guilt of letting this beautiful family go and just throwing it to the wayside, right? I wanted something to numb the pain and numb the shame and, make me feel good about myself because in turn I was just not a good person at the moment. So it spiraled out at that time.
And I think a lot of people have mothers, aunts, sisters, friends who gone through something actually quite similar here in Utah,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't have the courage to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things we sweep under the rug here in Utah. And so did you know quite a few of your neighbors, friends who were also doctor shopping and also kind of going through this like, oh man, where am I going to get my pills from?
You know, people hear that I have a Xanax, right? Just in passing, right? Oh, I'll trade you a Xanax, next door neighbor, for this Percocet, and then it starts with trading, and then you kind of get a an idea of who the people are that are using. You can spot if you're a user, if you're a drug user, you know who else is using too. Then I go to work. I worked in the mortgage industry for 20 years, and I'm outside having a break, and I could see in this girl who was having a break working for another company, I could tell that I can tell that she has something and I'm gonna get what I can from her. And that's when she introduced me to doctor shopping.
Well,
So it's something that you can see in other people if you're a substance abuser, if you're an addict.
what is that? What is it you see?
Just
Right?
the way they carry themselves, the way they talk, and once the conversation gets going, you're in.
Huh.
You, and you're looking for it,
And
obviously.
is it just really pervasive? Like at least what year were you going through this?
This was probably about 2008, 2009 when it started.
Okay.
Mhm.
That was like when it was super bad.
Yeah, you can get oxys easy from any doctor, excuse me, and any friend that
And was it where there were pain clinics, right? Or pill mills in Utah at that time, or
I'm not
were they already
familiar
shut
with
down?
that, but, with these friends that you see, right, the ones that you can point out that you know that they're using too, because you can tell by their eyes, by the way they carry themselves, you can tell that, you know, they have them too, and then they tell you, "Oh, you can go to this doctor way out here in West Valley, and he'll give you what you need if you just tell him this."
Ah, so they'd even flag the specific doctor
Absolutely, yeah.
and so how did you take the leap from pills to heroin?
Pills got expensive, I was working, like I said before, but I couldn't make rent. So therefore, I'm reaching out to my church to pay rent and using my income to buy pills. And pills got to be so expensive. And I was mentioning that to a particular drug dealer who had pills that I was buying from. And he said to me, that, "Hey, I have this heroin. It's much cheaper." And the tagline for me that he sold me on was, "My grandma takes heroin and sells her pills so she can pay her rent." And that I'm like, "Well, okay, if grandma's doing it, that makes it okay for me too." It sounds so
It's
ridiculous.
quite a selling point.
It is. And it sounds so ridiculous and so far left, but I went with it
Hmm.
and I was hooked.
Wow. And were you can you tell us where you were in the suburbs? Like, where were you living?
I lived in West Jordan.
Okay. And I just the thing about it is I don't know that a community or a society ever, like, fully heals from an epidemic like the prescription pain pill epidemic we went through until people start telling their stories.
Mhm.
Did you know people who were actually dying and overdosing from these
I
pills?
I didn't encounter that until probably about 3 years into my heroin addiction, where the same woman who taught me how to doctor shop and how to lie to doctors and which doctor to go to, she she in turn turned to heroin before I did, and, she died of a heroin overdose. That's the only person that I've encountered at the time. As I went on, of course, you hear about people who are using and passing away, but that was probably the one that hit me hard.
Mm. And so at what point were you like, "I can't live like this anymore, and I just have to change?"
I didn't make that decision. Somebody helped me make that decision. Like I mentioned before, I was couch surfing and I would go and my mom, who I felt like I could manipulate all the time, was always finding somewhere for me to go, like a friend, right? I would go to her friend's house, take from her friend, ruin that relationship for her, and then she would be in denial about, my daughter doesn't have an addiction, and she was trying to find me another couch to surf on, which was a very close friend who we call my aunt, right? And I move in with her. I find out that she has pain pills. I get into her closet. I take her pain pills. And her son saw me on the couch, and I was going through withdrawals at the time. And he said, there's something going on with her. She needs help. So and it was talked about amongst my mom and my sister, my older sister. And she's like, you have a problem? I'm like, no, I don't. I'm good, And she took me to adult referral services, which I got approved to go to Odyssey House. But I had to go to the VOA first. And I had no intention of getting clean. I didn't want to feel anymore. I hurt a lot of people. And I just basically wanted to die from an overdose just to end it all because I was in so much pain with everything that I've done to everybody. I took from my sister had knee surgery. I took from her, I would give my nieces a gift card for their birthday, and then I'd go break into her house and take it and sell it to somebody for half the value because I just needed to get that high. If you had pills, I sniffed them out. If you had money, I stole from you. I just took advantage of so many people and hurt so many people along the way because I did not care. I did not care to be alive.
Wow. And so you got to this extremely low point where you realized you had destroyed every single relationship in your life.
Yep, I had a restraining order against me at my sister's house. I went and lived with a friend for a short time. Her son was saving up for money for a car. I found that money, took that money from him. And like I mentioned before, my aunt took me to adult referral services and then took me to the VOA probably a day or two later. And I was to call Odyssey House at a certain time every day to get in there. I made it a point that I would make the call when I knew I wouldn't get an answer. And I just kind of hung out at the VOAs for as long as they would let me.
And that's the shelter, right?
It's a detox center.
Oh, okay. That guy mentioned that yesterday, and I was like, VOA, is that Volunteers of America?
Volunteers of America, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I stayed there for as long as I could. And in the interim, I'm calling my family, right? Trying to get, cigarettes or money or clothes or whatever, right? And I was rude to them. I was mean to them. So they stopped taking my calls. I was there for just over 30 days. And they told me, you can't be here anymore. You've got to move on. And I had nowhere to go. And so, talk amongst the other people at the VOA, it's like, well, where do I go? What do I do? Oh, there's a trap house over here you can go, or this dumpster over here is safe. And that was my decision. And so I made one last call to my sister, left a message, and I'm sitting on the VOA property, and it's about 10 o'clock at night, and they're like, you need to move along. And at that moment, my sister pulls up with her husband. They get me in the van, and I owe a lot of my life, saving my life to my sister and also the other side movers. And the reason is because when they go and they move these people, they tell their story and it really hits people in the heart, and they want to share it with other people. And my sister was at work and heard about the other side movers. I'm sure she was talking about, I don't know what to do with my sister anymore. This is where she's at. She's struggling. We don't have any insurance or anything for her. And she picked me up. She put me in the van and she said, well, we found a place for you. And I said, oh, okay. She goes, yeah, it's 2 years long. At the time, it was 2 years long. And it's free. And we're going to drop you off right now. And in my mind, I'm thinking, you're crazy. I'm not going to go for 2 years because my plan at Odyssey is I was going to go there and go out and use when I could. I'm sure they do UAs. Everybody does, right? But I had ulterior motives. I just didn't want to quit doing drugs. They dropped me off. It was about 9:45 at night, and the house was closed. There was nobody really up except for like the men who were on security and Steve Strong, who met us at the door. And I sat on the bench and waited for an interview, not knowing what I was getting into at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
So almost like a rapid intervention.
Yeah. Yep.
And so you sat on the bench, and then what point did you realize I'm gonna try this and commit to it?
I knew that I had nowhere else to go. I knew that my family wouldn't let me back on their property. I knew I burned every bridge that there ever was, and I really didn't have a choice. I was honestly really scared, and I thought I just sat there. They kept me on the bench for quite some time, till probably the next afternoon before I got my interview and got accepted. But not having a choice and being scared to go sleep behind whatever dumpster or go stay at a trap house where you don't even I don't feel like I have
Trap house.
like a place where they go and there's drugs and there's
Oh, just
women
a
and
house
there's
full of
yeah,
bad stuff.
yes.
Okay.
And not having the street smart like some people do, I was scared of that too.
Mhm.
So,
Um, so you obviously made the right choice, but you still were stuck in that heroin addict brain. I'm just really curious, like when your brain is in that mode, I think I know a little bit about how the brain works. The prefrontal cortex is at the front of your brain. That's the human reasoning where I know the difference between good and bad. And the cerebral cortex is like the back of your brain where you're just fight or flight, your animal instincts are at work. Like and I'm just curious, like how do you make that shift and that transition from operating in this survival mode, I need drugs, and how do they do that at the academy so you can transition somebody from give me drugs now and these people are acting like animals to like, oh man, what I did was wrong and now I know the difference between right and wrong. Like, how do they make people want to stay there?
you know, it takes time. There's a lot of people when they first come in, they're still, let me say, trying to land, and you talk about it, right? You talk about your cravings, you talk about wanting to use. I remember being a freshman, that's your first of your stay at the academy, and knowing that there was a drug dealer less than a half a block away that I knew, right? And expressing that to my leader. And I said, look, I want to go use right now. I know. And I told her exactly what I was going to do, how I was going to use it, and she just sat there and listened. She goes, yeah, but is that something you really want to go back to? And then you reflect on all the trouble and it's an ugly place to be an addict, honestly. You know what I mean?
Mm.
You have nobody around you, you're isolated, you're in a dark hole. And there was a little part of me that knew I didn't want to go back to that. But being able to express it and having that person understand being right where I was at one time in her life and comforting me with that and knowing, I'm in a good place, I'm safe. It's just about mentoring and talking about it really.
Yeah. And that model as opposed to I don't know, a counselor who's got a psych degree, who's
Mm.
never been an addict, I'm sure that just makes a lot of difference because if they did it, you could do it.
Yeah, and I know that I could manipulate a doctor. I know I could manipulate a therapist. I manipulated my family and my mother, and I had that part of me that was really ugly. But, having somebody that has been right where I was and was honest with me, brutal honesty, she helped me through that.
That's awesome. Well, I want to take a little break, and when we get back, I want to show you a clip of a girl out on the street um, who was really candid and courageous to give me an interview about her addiction, and you can probably comment on that. I'm showing this clip because I want to have a fully recovered drug addict who's on the program, um, Marci from the Other Side Academy, comment on this person. And my heart goes out to the people who talk to me on the streets. We do this because we feel compassionate for them. We want to see them recover. We want to see them have hope again. And and I really thank them for talking to me. So I know we have an audience of people um, who basically watch this who are homeless. And so my hope is that if you're homeless or you know somebody who's homeless, you'll chime in on the Instagram live feed. You'll give us your comments. You'll give us your questions. Maybe you'll give us a little bit of anecdote story of somebody you know who's going through this. But that's why we live stream on Instagram. And so I hope you can pass up the cat videos on Instagram for just a short period of time and watch this because I love doing it. Thank you so much for joining me, Marci.
Happy to be here.
And Marci, you were not, were you homeless at any point?
I
Yeah.
did lose my home, but I was more homeless in the way of couch surfing, going to people's houses and using and taking from them while I was there until I couldn't be there anymore and they would kick me out and I'd go find another couch for as long as that worked.
And so I'll play this clip now because this gal is homeless And this was about 3 weeks ago. And here it goes.
Caitlin,
How long you been out here?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time. You look really young.
I'm 25.
So since you were a teenager.
Yeah, since I was 18.
And what happens when it gets really cold? It's obviously getting cold really fast right now. What do you do out there when it gets
Like, how do we stay warm?
Yeah.
I mean, hand sanitizer is one of the biggest things I hear, because hand sanitizer fires, alcohol creates, a fire that you don't have to worry about smoke and fumes and stuff like that with. But that keeps you warm. Lots of blankets. Anywhere that is not going to treat you like you're worthless and that you can actually be at, like a lot of places will kick you off property, or like won't let you go inside for 5 minutes to get warm at the gas station, and they just kick you out because they don't want the homeless population there. They don't like seeing it. They look at us as a bad fashion. So, basically just go anywhere that we're accepted, and as much blankets and hand sanitizers as we can have, or wood fires.
And you're not staying in one of the overflow shelters or
No.
shelters?
I don't stay in the shelters. I don't like them.
Yeah. Like, what's the reason you don't like?
I feel like I don't know. Checking in reminds me kind of being in jail, because they search you, they give you a curfew, they make you, you're not allowed to leave from X amount of time to X amount of time, or whatever. Like, let's say you have an emergency and you need to go outside and do something. Like, you can't, or you lose your bed, or you lose your spot to stay. You know what I mean? You can't. If you leave, then you essentially, you're screwed. And I feel like I can find my own survival out here better than I can at the shelters.
Yeah. And when it gets super cold, are you able to get indoors somewhere?
Sometimes.
Where do you go?
I have friends' houses that I go to sometimes, every now and then. There's like places like warehouses that you technically shouldn't go in because it's trespassing, but places that are not being used, like I said, warehouses or buildings that are shut down, stuff like that. That you kind of just find your way in somehow, and like, as long as you're like, I try to keep my stuff like clean and neat and stuff, and don't set fires inside places like that because you don't want to burn it down. But just keep your shit good, and nobody notices you, so you just find a place like that to go make a hidey spot.
Have you taken advantage of the Second South Church?
I haven't heard of that one.
The movie night
Right.
where
Oh no, I have heard about that one. No, I've heard that it's really good though. I never make it there on time or for anything. I always end up stuck out here doing something, because again, I will ride the tracks without a ticket, and sometimes I don't have money to buy the ticket, and I'm not, when it's that cold, I'm not trying to walk from here to there.
Yeah.
Yeah. My hands are like insanely in pain all the time, so are my joints, because how cold it is. It's like bitter.
Yeah. Well, God bless you out here, man. It's not.
Caitlin?
Okay. So Caitlin, 23 years old, been out on the streets for 7 years. And so if my math's right, that's since she was 16. And obviously I asked her off camera a little bit about how do you stay warm? And she said it's the drugs. The drugs help her stay warm. And a lot of people out there believe that. Like I think maybe meth speeds up your metabolism to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
But she's also couch surfing. What would you recommend Caitlin do?
I look at her and I think she has a light in her eyes and has potential, and my heart breaks for her, first of all. And, I think that I wish that, I think sometimes people choose to live that way when, there's a better way, and maybe she's frightened. I would really encourage her to reach out to a program, whether it be the Village or the Other Side Academy or Odyssey House or wherever, because I I think that she deserves a better life, and she's not giving herself a chance. When you say that the drugs are probably keeping her warm or whatever else it is.
That's a myth.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that, but then
I've heard that
we've
too.
had a lot of people freeze to death on the streets who are using drugs. And
Some people will just keep walking and walking and walking and walking to stay warm. I mean, they're just wearing themselves out. Being 23 and living that life for 7 years she's got to be exhausted.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she needs to hit a rock bottom like some people do, but I would encourage her to give herself a chance and reach out, because like I said before, she obviously has some potential. She seems intelligent,
yeah,
I feel for her.
yeah. Well, you look at her and you talk to a lot of the people on the street, and they're not that far gone. Like, they look like they could be a waitress, no problem, at any downtown restaurant if they just got cleaned up and it's like, but then she's been on that substance for so long, and that's the life she knows. And she had a boyfriend. I really wanted to talk to him. He was a big, strong, tough guy, and he looked actually quite capable too. Um, but it's like we've got this homeless problem. I said it on the last segment. Between 2023 and 2022 and 2023, we had a 27% increase in our homeless population in Salt Lake City. And that's for a whole number of reasons. You brought up opioids, and that's the thing you were afflicted with the most. But a lot of people are born into a drug addiction and that lifestyle. And a lot of people are filled with pain, and they're recovering, and they're trying to get over trauma. But when you look at the big picture of what we're faced with in this country and in Salt Lake City, what do you think is the big picture answer to this huge problem?
I don't know what the big picture answer is. I think, people have to find, that they have some worth and they can do something different. She mentioned, the shelter and having structure and having curfew and things like that. And some people are opposed to that, but I think, when I got out of the Other Side Academy, I grew up having those things, but I didn't, use my full potential until somebody pushed me. I think maybe some encouragement, to help others, getting the word out there, um having resources. I know we do outreach for us, right? And I'm sure that there's other places too, but maybe getting the word out there to them that there's other things that they can do, you know what I mean? Rather than choose to live that way.
Well, this extreme distrust for the shelters is very common.
Absolutely.
And there's a term called shelter resistant. And um, and I heard a guy talking who's now a homeless leader, and I don't disparage him for saying this because he knows what he knows. Everybody just knows what they know. But he was saying um, I'm taxpayer resistant. But that doesn't mean I don't pay my taxes, because I know that means I'm going to go to jail.
Mhm.
There's these shelter resistant people out there, and they need to go into shelters or any other program. They can't be out on the streets, period. But the problem is a lot of people are getting abused in shelters. A lot of people are getting all their belongings stolen. Um, a lot of people aren't getting a recovery at all. And so what would you recommend to this shelter resistant population?
I have heard people say, hey, I don't want to go to a shelter because there's still drugs there. And like you mentioned, there's people who steal from me, or it's violent and there's abuse there. I think being encouraged that there's a safe place somewhere for them. I'm going to mention the Other Side Academy again because that's what saved my life, right? You live in that lifestyle, you lose trust with people because you're not honestly, you're distrustful. I was very dishonest. I was a thief. I was a liar. I was a manipulator, right? But that's how you have to live out there. They have to know that there's other options out there for them. And, if they get encouraged to go to a place where, you know, people aren't going to take their stuff, people aren't going to put them down, people aren't going to abuse them, people are going to love them and help them and mentor them through it.
Yeah, I'm going to read one comment from Wako Skin Haley. Wako Skin Haley. He says, or she says, I'm not sure. I was homeless by choice. I was surviving on alcohol. I just didn't have enough to care about. I've been sober now for 17 years. I believe it's a frame of mind. A lot of people like the freedom. Was there a certain element like a friend told me who was homeless for periods of his life. He loved train jumping and train hopping, and he'd just go to whatever city and go experience it and get on a train, and it was just like freight trains. That actually sounded kind of cool to me.
Yeah, it's
But
an adventure.
yeah, is there any part of it where you're just like every day is kind of a new adventure, where there is a thrill to being out there and being, I don't know, every day just surviving?
It was just surviving the best that I could. I don't think it was an adventure for myself. I've heard people train jumping too, and they go see, the United States and enjoy it, right? But it can only last for so long. I think that I have a good friend who was at the Other Side Academy with me who did that too. She went back east and all the way to San Francisco. And eventually she got tired. She has a lot of cool stories, but I honestly think it's a choice. People choose to live that way because it's freedom for them. They can do what they want to do without government or people telling them what to do.
I heard that so often about 5 years ago among young people. Like, I'm homeless by choice. This is my choice. This is my lifestyle. And this one woman said to me, I mean, why would I want to work at some call center or a Walmart under fluorescent lights when I can hang out by the river all day, use drugs, feel great, go get a bike, steal a bike, get more drugs, get food. Everybody brings me food. And I'm like, huh, that's an interesting way to frame it, because they're obvious. It is kind of a lifestyle choice for a lot of people. And how do you get them to choose a better lifestyle? It just seems like you said, I mean, reaching some kind of rock bottom.
Yeah, and realizing that, you get tired. You get tired of living that way. I wasn't living homeless like that, but you get tired of chasing the drug. You get tired of stealing from people. You get tired of not, people give up on you, honestly, and don't want you around anymore. And then you have nobody, right? And that's the point where I just didn't want to live anymore, is because I don't have a family anymore. I don't have my children in my life anymore. You just get tired of it. It's surviving out there. They might tell you, I don't know, people do believe that it's a cool lifestyle, but I think that people, if they find a purpose, and find something that they enjoy, you don't have to sit behind a desk.
Yeah. Well, I kind of describe it like this, and there's a ladder going up, and that ladder is extremely difficult to climb, especially if you're at the bottom. And that ladder will lead to, like Brian Billmeyer described on this program, you can eventually buy your own car. You can eventually have your own house. You can eventually get married. You can have a good job. But it's a lot of steps to climb. But there's also a ladder going down.
Yeah.
And that ladder going down is instant gratification. Every day is a new adventure. I look at these crazy people I meet, and I'm part of this weird, like, underbelly community. And then the government gives handouts to folks who've been chronically homeless for a certain number of years, and your points go up to qualify for a free apartment. And then I see people get these free apartments, and they're still drug addicts, like the Magnolia place where I was at yesterday, full of drug addicts, because they've gotten there by going on the ladder going down, and it only leads to more destruction. And according to an inside source of that public housing facility, 15 people died there last year. So yeah, you reach the bottom of the ladder and you got your free apartment, but then what do you get? Death. I mean, a death sentence, basic. So it's like, how do you get people off the ladder going down and get them on the one going up?
You talk about having the things, an apartment and cars and maybe a partner. And when you're in that lifestyle, you don't get to keep them, right? You have to really dedicate yourself to doing something different. I had all those things too. I had a home, I had cars, I had money, and I chose to throw them all away because I wanted to get high, right? Now I've learned, since being at the academy and helping other people, I get to keep those things. I work hard for them. It's not easy, but it's also something that, I can say, hey, I did just buy my car, right? I did just complete financial literacy, and I have a savings account now, and I get to keep it. It's about working towards it and keeping it. You can be in that lifestyle and have something, but you lose it for something else.
Is there some kind of, like, for lack of a better term, like, shallowness to the suburban lifestyle that caused so many people to become pain pill addicts in the mid to late 2010s? Like,
I don't know if it's shallowness, but it's like keeping up with the Joneses and putting on that appearance that everything's great when inside the house it's really not that great. You're fighting with your husband, your child's really sick, you don't feel good about yourself, and I think, and masking it with the drug. I think that's probably the shallow part of it. Your neighbor puts on this appearance that they're perfect and you want to be perfect too and have all the things it, and it's not living in reality, you know what I mean? You're just putting on a show for somebody next door to they're good, but they're
Mhm.
really not.
And that's not a purpose-driven life.
No, no,
Just that's an appearance-driven life and
absolutely.
pretty thin, flimsy facade if that's all you got. Because it's, yeah, we moved from kind of the city to the suburbs, and we live adjacent to a neighborhood where it's all about keeping up with the
Yeah.
Joneses. And you see like the Teslas and the Rivians and all the fancy cars. And I'm like, man, that would be a lot of pressure to live in that neighborhood, and you gotta have a perfect yard and the perfect lights at Christmas time. And it's like, what are you getting out of that? Like, it's just a strange way that we choose to live in America, that is super important to us.
I like people who are real and will show their emotions and tell me about themselves because keeping up with the Joneses is extremely hard. I lived that way. That's how I was raised, right? If you look good on the outside and your house is perfect, you go to church on Sunday, but on Monday you're drinking or you're smoking or whatever else. But if the neighbors think you're good, then you're okay.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think you brought up the point that having somebody to call you out, I also, for lack of a better term, and sorry to offend anybody, but to call you out on your bullshit.
Yeah.
I think that is really powerful. Like to have a spouse or a partner who's going to say, "Hey, look, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, what you're throwing your life away, and you're making some stupid decisions." And do you think that that's also lacking in American culture?
Absolutely. I only, out of a wide range of family members, even my husband or my daughter or my son did call me out on it, right? My sister absolutely did, and my aunt did too. And that's when, I decided, well, they decided then help me get some help. But, at the academy, it's about brutal honesty, and that's what I needed. I needed somebody to tell me, you're a liar. You're manipulating me. You're sneaky. You're being mean to this person. And it hurts in the moment, right? But after you get told that so many times, you're like, I do not want to be this person anymore. I want to be good inside. And then you're good on the outside too. And you don't have to prove to your neighbors that my yard looks great and I have this Tesla and I'm good. I'm really good on the inside because somebody told me about myself.
Yeah. And so to get back to your story, you found recovery to begin with in Salt Lake, but then you ended up going to Colorado. Can you explain how that happened?
I sure can. So I went into the academy. I mentioned before I was a liar. I was a very, very, that was my thing. You know what? I did my interview and I lied about having an education. And and they call it being dirty at the academy, right? And if you hold on to any little secret, secrets kill is what we say, right? You don't get what you came for. And so I progressed, I went up to junior. I was a senior when I walked away, but holding on to this dirt, you're continually making mistakes. I don't know how many hours I did, because in the back of your mind it's sitting there. And there was an incident where I
Just
got
to pause you lied that you had not had an education
that I
when
gr-
you
I
had?
I did not. I did not graduate from high school, and I was really ashamed of that.
Oh, but you said you did.
It's the keeping up appearances thing.
Oh,
You know what I
got it.
mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to look stupid. When I'm in a community where they wouldn't judge me, they would only help me, and that's what ended up happening. But there was an incident where I was a dorm head and I got pulled into the quorum for some hours. I got told about myself, and I was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. And I walked away from the academy. I was 19 months in. And I knew the minute I walked past that one piece of sidewalk, it was done, and I made the biggest mistake of my life. It was the start of COVID. There was nobody on the road. It was a ghost town. I couldn't call my family. They wouldn't want me. They would be disappointed in me that I had left. And I was walking down I remember they used to talk about the Pioneer Park Coalition. And I thought in my head, oh, they're going to help me. I don't need anything. And I go down to this place, and it's a little apartment. And the guy's like, well, do you have an ID? And I'm like, no. And he goes, well, do you have a job? And I'm like, no. And he goes, well, I can't help you here. I said, well, what do I do? And he goes, you need to go to the women's shelter. So I'm clear out west by the gateway and have to walk all the way to State Street and Second South, right? And I'm trying to get there before 7 p.m. And again, nobody on the road. And all of a sudden I get to State Street and about First South, and I see this gentleman, yelling my name, and he had a beard, and I'm like, who is that? Because I didn't have my glasses. It happened to be a graduate who was moving out of the graduate house that day to go live on his own. And he pulled me aside. He's like, what are you doing? And I told him the whole story. He goes, you need to go back to the academy. I said, I'm not going back. I do not want to do it. It's hard. I know what I have to face because I would have to restart and do a contract and the shame of it, right? And we pulled in front of the shelter, and it was just sad because there was a lot of people struggling out there. It was obvious what was going on, people fighting over here. And he looked at me and he goes, is this what you really want to do? And I was having this battle within myself, and I'm like, no, and I started crying, and he took me back to the academy. I sat on the bench again, and Dave came to me and he said, how would you like to restart your stay in Denver? And I'm like, what do I have to lose? People that I had built a relationship, the woman who helped me through that time in the garden where I wanted to use so badly, Robin, who you probably know her too, was really close with me. And I restarted in Denver and did another 2 years.
Wow.
But I went with that lie still.
Really?
I did. I held on to that lie until I was a junior in my stay over there. And it came out where my sister called to ask me how my education was doing, if I got my GED yet, and Lola pulled me in the quorum. And I lied to her face about it. And finally, I'm just like, why am I carrying this anymore? You know what I mean? And I did another contract, but I got my GED. And that's when it changed for me, when I let go of that lie and that secret.
That's interesting, because that doesn't seem like a big lie. That seems like pretty insignificant.
I think for me, coming from a family of highly educated people, having my sister, I think she might have her doctorate now. I know she has her master's for sure. My mom's a college graduate, all these people who I felt like I had to live up to, when all I really had to do is do it for myself, to have that accomplishment. It wasn't about going through college. It's about doing something for yourself that makes you feel good.
Wow. And after you told the truth about your education, you felt like you could finally graduate? Sorry.
I felt like the biggest, darkest secret for me, one of them anyways, that I was going to take to the grave because I was so embarrassed of it, had been lifted, and there was no stopping me after that. You know what I mean? I became a leader in the house. I really dug into who I wanted to become, and I graduated Denver, of course, did staff and training, and I became a staff member over there. And there was nothing but love for me when I told, they supported me. Yeah, it was so silly,
Well, that's awesome. Well, I guess we better wrap up. Your story is awesome and it's inspiring, and I think it's takes a lot of courage to talk about it, especially if you weren't born into it. But you represent probably millions of people across the United States who got addicted to opioids and painkillers, and that really shattered their lives. And so thanks so much for coming on, Marci.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
All right. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to be a bigger part of Utah Stories, go visit utahstories.com. Also, go visit the Other Side Academy and go check out their programs, the Other Side Village, the Other Side Donut Shop, the Other Side Moving Company, the Thrift Store. They are an incredible organization they're just growing. They grew from just one moving company to all these social enterprises. I just think it's one of the best Utah stories we have in Utah. So visit them at the Other Side Academy online, and visit Utah Stories at utahstories.com if you want to support our coverage. You can become a member for $5 a month. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.